Hello and welcome to Power Sports International and the first Power Sports special of 1988. In 1987 we had the World Touring Car Championship. That unfortunately is no more. But Group A certainly was very much to the fore in 1986, which led to it. This year we get ETC again, but we look at the last year of the ETC 1986 and one particular team. A team too that sadly is no longer with us. Volvo retired at the end of that season. But for 3 years, they were at the top of the tree. Rudi Eggenberger had run the team in 1985. And at the end of that year, Volvo had taken home to Sweden the European Championship, in the hands of the Italian Gianfranco Brancatelli and Thomas Lindström. For 1986, there was a big surprise. Eggenberger was unable to come to agreement with Volvo over a contract. In came the Belgian RAS team, with Britain's John Wickham drafted in at an early stage of the season to manage. The drivers changed too, and as Olofsson stayed with them, Thomas Lindström joined, and Ulf Granberg was there. But unfortunately, Brancatelli had gone, snapped up by Tom Walkinshaw, and in his place was Johnny Cecotto. Let's look at the drivers before then we look at the Volvo film on them. First, Thomas Lindström, the man responsible for the development of the Volvo in racing. He and his father had done all the early work and run the early cars in 1983. Some of it was shared too by Ulf Granberg, his fellow Swede, a hard charger and a man who thoroughly enjoyed his opportunity to dice wheel to wheel with the likes of Tom Walkinshaw, Jeff Allen and, of course, other British drivers in the Rover team. Anders Olofsson had come from Formula 3, and as primarily a single-seater driver, he liked to set a car up an entirely different way perhaps to Lindström and Granberg, who were saloon car stars. This therefore suited him to pairing with Johnny Cecotto. And when trouble intervened between Cecotto and Lindström over how the car should be set up, that's the way the pairing went for the latter half of the season. It was certainly an exciting season, and Spa almost proved that a turbo car could win the race. A spectacular sight at any time, the 24-hour race is the blue ribbon as far as motor racing is concerned of saloon car racing in Europe. The night scenes and the crowds are very reminiscent of Le Mans, and the circuit in the Ardennes is absolutely packed for this event. Aside from the huge crowds that come to enjoy the nighttime scenes and the pit work, television-wise, it went all over the world, as it will in 1988. And Volvo, as we said, all but won the race. It was a tremendous display by the Volvo team. Silverstone, frankly, was a disappointment. Perhaps the only big thing here was that we had a chance to see it in-car camera, to prove that Britain can do what the Australians and the Continentals can do, and we don't have to be in Formula 1 to do it either. Here the Volvos went well, but a new challenge was on the scene, in the shape of the Ford, not with the Cosworth engine, but with the Mercer engine, as had been developed by Britain's Andy Rouse. It was a tremendous ending to a very competitive season indeed. Volvo's last season in the European Touring Car Championship. And everyone wonders one day, will they come back? Because racing like this was really exciting, with the angular Volvos fighting it out with the Fords and the Rovers over the circuit of Europe. For 1988, however, we may be without Volvo, but some of the drivers who were there at that time, the names that we shall be seeing now, Johnny Cecotto, Anders Olofsson, Thomas Lindström and Ulf Granberg, could very well be taking part in the 88 season. And when you're watching this film, we shall be preparing the first of the 88 European Touring Car Championship races for Screen Sport viewers and for viewers across the world. This then was Volvo's look at how 1986 went, however, from the driver's point of view. And we see some unique shots at what Swedish racing drivers do when they're not driving Volvos.
I've always wanted to win. Coming in first, that's what really counts. A third place is the same as losing to me. Driving a train gives you plenty of time to think a whole lot of things over. Look back over the situation and think about what happened. I often do that, wonder why this and that happened. You sort of analyze the race several times, what went wrong. When I get home, I might phone Belgium, talk to the team and ask them to check a particular thing. I mean, after a race, you can't always remember to tell them about that strange noise or something else about the car. It's really important. I mean, they can't know, even if they do their best. I mean, they're in the pits all the time.
De står ju i depån, de kan ju inte veta, även om de gör sitt bästa så kan de inte veta felet man har haft.
Det här handlar ju om perfektionism egentligen alltså.
Perfection is what it's all about, actually. If you make a mistake as you go to a corner, you've lost half a second there and then. And you're reminded about it again and again. Every time you complete a lap and see the times that your mechanics are waving at you.
Vilka tider man presterar och allt det här va.
From my point of view, it's important to participate, but it's also important to win. I think without having the view to the victory, you are not giving the maximum you could give.
It's great to feel you can make full use of it. It's a beautiful feeling. You just can't describe it. You can only experience it. If this sort of thing scares you, then you're quite simply dangerous.
Ulf Granberg, Anders Olofsson, Johnny Cicotto, Thomas Lindström. 4 sportsmen among the best in their field, racing in standard cars Group A. Cars produced in a series of at least 5,000 during 12 months, of which 500 form part of an evolution series.
It's becoming more and more professional, and above all, much tougher. It's not just the race, you know. If you're going to be ahead of the rest, then you've just got to drive and check out everything. Even if you know the track from last year, they might have laid new asphalt or changed something else. You've got to keep up to date with these things, test any new tires, see what the best rubber compositions are. That's if you want to win. If you're content staying way down the list, then you probably don't need to take things so seriously. But doing things properly requires a lot of time.
The cars are divided into 3 classes. Ulf, Johnny and Anders compete in the most spectacular class. Vehicles with engines exceeding a cylinder volume of 2,500 cc.
Man vet gränsen då, till exempel då, i svängarna.
You know your limits at the corners, but then if you're out for just that little more, then you'll have a disaster on your hands. You just can't play your way around the corners. When the car's going flat out, that's when you've no damn margin at all. So if you make a mistake, you've had it. Practically there and then. There's nothing like taking it to the limit. Then you're left with absolutely no margin for error. It's better to have the car slightly understeered. Then you can throttle ever so slightly, use the engine, then sit back and feel the response.
Almost 1,000.
I enjoy it very much. It's also a very professional job, which I like doing 100%. Not only driving, but also working with the mechanics, doing all I can to improve the car.
One more.
20 seconds. 120 litres of petrol are pumped in. 4 tyres are changed. A new driver takes over. All in 20 seconds. Perfectionism. That's what this is all about. 20 seconds. They can't afford more.
Molto buoni. Oppure gnocchi di patata con pomodoro, formaggio, saltati in padella. Queste specialità della casa. Tre.
No.
Da bere, vino, acqua, coca? Acqua minerale, ok. Bene, grazie.
Precis, lite av varje skulle du ha.
Men din fisk, den missade du.
Det är inte fisk, för då orkar ingenting i munnen.
Vad jag jagar bäst egentligen, eller törst.
Ja, det är riktigt.
Faktiskt.
Voilà.
Du äter sillen, så äter jag köttet.
Nej, den är så salt sillen. Då får vi beställa in aqua mineraler till. Men däremot kan jag tycka.
I wanted to get into motorsports and cars and such like. I wasn't interested in most of the other sports. I felt like that sort of thing didn't suit me, but that driving did. I know there have been lots of others who also felt the same way but haven't managed. Racing standard cars is heavier than, for example, formula racing. This is how things are generally planned. You make one long pit stop, change wheels and the driver refuel, then there's a shorter stop at the end, a quick one for refueling, 20 or 30 litres. Of course, that can all be changed if you get a puncture or something like that. You have to change tactics right away and start counting right there in the pits. That's often where races are won or lost.
Racing is a male-dominated sport. There's barely a handful of women drivers in the business. The wives are noticeably absent.
You don't exactly get them to polish your helmet and hang up your jacket. If you want to play games, you'll have to do it yourself. That's what she says.
We've divided things up very nicely here. He looks after the garage and I take care of the house. No, seriously, he does help quite a bit when he's home. I think he sees more of his child than those working 9 to 5. I got scared once in Värmland. Ulf was driving a superstar Camaro in a hill climbing event and smashed into a tree. I thought he was going to die. It was terrible. That's the only time I've really been terrified. I suffered from shock for over an hour. I was in such a state they were going to drive me to a local hospital, but I asked them to take me home instead. That's the only time I've really been scared. It's a matter of respect more than of fear. Going about imagining they'd smash themselves up at any time would drive anyone mad.
Cominciato a prendere fuoco. Ho visto perché non ho potuto entrare. Ho visto. Prima dei pit, non ho potuto entrare perché non avevo freni, non vedevo un cazzo. Ho visto, adesso salta contro qualcosa. Fermarlo la macchina, va? Ma non c'aveva freno, potevo lì, cancelo. Ha bruciato? Non c'ha più. C'è solo fumo.
The car had burst into flames within seconds. Margins are small in this sport. Life hangs on a very fine thread.
I have to put a gear in and no slow down, no brakes, nothing. Just fire everywhere.
It's a matter of respect more than of fear.
The worst time, as far as nerves are concerned, are the final 20 minutes before you line up at the start grid. That's if you're actually going to start. And I've started in every race this season. It's nerve-wracking, just sitting there getting hot in the car. Lots of things run through your mind as you sit there in the heat, waiting.
Sam, have a good run. Huh? Okay, see you later.
47 meters are covered every second. Monza, 5,800 meters per lap, 86 laps. Time can be seen as something absolute, covering all events, or being a consequence of such events. The theory of relativity says there's no universally common time. The eye of Argus watches over every meter and every second. The mechanics have worked non-stop for 3 weeks, day and night. Ahead lie thousands of kilometers, 13 events totaling 70 hours of racing. Speed is vital, durability just as much. Johnny's leading, Ulf's in second place. Johnny comes in to be replaced by Thomas. Then something happens that just mustn't happen. The battery's flat. The spare one as well. Thomas can only sit and wait.
As a driver, you get really disappointed when the car doesn't start. I mean, it should all function perfectly. It's a real letdown seeing the seconds ticking away and any chance of a win or even a decent position disappearing just like that. You also get upset about the team, because at Monza we'd been at it for a fortnight and everything had been going well.
Ulf and Anders never got to the finishing line. Johnny and Thomas lost 6 laps and the chance of any points at all in the race. You don't have to beat anyone to win, but the disappointment feels like a cold shower. A race that started disastrously for Tom Walkinshaw and Wyn Percy suddenly turned into a victory for the two Britons. The step between joy and sorrow is small indeed, at least in motor racing.
I felt that it was about time we won here, to improve morale so they don't all get fed up and give up. It's a matter of being strong when things go against you, as they do sometimes. You've got to stand it and be obstinate and your luck will turn. It's just a matter of time.
One loses count of how many times the car's been stripped down, reassembled and parts screwed on here and there. The team behind the drivers has proved its efficiency. The drivers have shown their class. And Georgette looks after all of them. Every track has its peculiarities. Continual adjustments have to be made to adapt the cars to the different tracks. Is it over or understeered? Should we change the suspension and shock absorbers?
I want to try harder springs at the front. Handsprings. Like I had yesterday.
What is the car doing?
Yeah, it's rolling too much.
Rolling too much?
Yes. Especially out of the corner. It goes like that.
The suspension and shock absorbers are vital for road holding, particularly through the corners.
The car could have 4 different suspension units fitted, just as there may be 4 tires with different rubber compositions. So it's not quite as simple as it might look. There's your car, you put 4 tires on, drop of petrol, there's the steering wheel, here's the driver, he hops in, and you're away. There could be up to 10 different degrees of hardness for the front suspension, and another 6 for the rear units as well.
Life in the racing circuit is life on the track. Nothing else exists. During the week prior to the race, mechanics and drivers are there every day from 7 in the morning until the early hours of the following morning. Georgette's here, and work has to be done.
No, it's enough.
The laps roll by day after day. Tires are changed, suspension units are adjusted, a new actuator is fitted. Will it go faster now? Time is fact, but you can't describe the feel of the car in words.
Björn! Björn! Tydligen ska vi fortsätta med vår maskin nu, va?
Will you manage to prepare a box giving 1 and 4, 1 and 45? As we're going to have to change this engine anyway by tomorrow, we have an hour to warm up. They won't have time now. That's why I wonder if you manage to get a box ready giving 1, 4, 145 without water.
Kan du göra det med vår då?
Får nästan ha teamchefens okej på det, va? Men preparera honom för det så ställer jag upp på det.
The cars are built up and adjusted according to the strict regulations set by the International Automobile Sports Federation, FISA. The engines develop 350 horsepower. In their original version, they produce a modest 150 horsepower. But the limits have by no means been reached, so testing and research is continuously being carried out. This includes the development of a large turbo. Turbo pressure in a racing car is up to 1. The engines are assembled and fitted by hand. They don't have the same level of tolerance as standard engines. It takes 50 minutes to change an engine, 20 minutes for a rear axle. An actuator can be changed in under half an hour.
Huvudleden.
During the season, I just managed to do a little jogging. You do so much test driving that you manage to keep fit that way. You don't use the same muscles anyway. I don't think it really helps however much you run. You really can't manage to drive that much faster. It's a matter of being basically very fit. I think you've got to be born with the talent. You can learn to drive up to a certain extent, but you can't manage those final tenths of a second really fast without it being inborn, and that's for sure. I do, in fact, try to get regular exercise, jogging, running, as well as a little weightlifting. I feel that my body really needs the exercise. Once you've reached 30 or 35, you have to work to keep in shape. You don't rush around chasing girls any longer. Fitness becomes something you achieve artificially, so to say.
Much to the delight of the crowd, the men in their protective gear rev up the engines of their metal-clad chariots. The gladiators begin. Is it the power, the speed, excitement, or the fact that an accident can happen at any moment that causes people to flock to the arenas in their masses? Is it the outer glamour, or the smell of high-octane fuel that tickles the senses? It might be the massive power lurking behind the painful roar of the engines. Or perhaps it's the thrill of the gladiators' games, the dangerous antics of the trapeze artist, and the promise of a fight with lives at stake. This raw power, the fascination with speed which has mysteriously thrilled people for hundreds of years. It's important to find the right line into the corner in order to come out of it properly. Anders is leading ahead of Thomas, lap after lap, the materials taking a lot of beating. For 3.5 hours, the engines are revving at the limit of what they can take. We're on the last lap but one. Johnny's waiting with his mechanic to give Anders the lap time. But where's Anders? It's Thomas who reaches the finishing line first. Tom Walkinshaw's behind him, followed by Anders. That's racing in a nutshell.
A fillet without bones.
There's not much of that glamour left after 2 weeks of non-stop work and the release of tension that comes after a race. Behind all this, what's on their mind right now is a really long sleep. Next day, it's the press's turn to take a spin and experience what it's like to rush forward at 260 kilometers an hour. It's part of the glamour. Probably more glamorous for the journalists than for the drivers. But it's all part of the job.
Excellent. Yeah, you like it? Very good. Tieni scaldo, eh? Gli ho promesso 2 minuti giusto, eh? Aspetta solo quel momento lì.
There are probably warmer places to visit than Anderstorp, Sweden in May. The team's been here 2 weeks testing new tires. They measure temperature, try different compositions of rubber, measure pressures and make adjustments.
The tire is, a component of the car, which is very, very important, which makes a lot of difference in the lap time and during the race also. Because you can have a very quick tire, but it lasts maybe only for 2 laps, like a qualifier, or you have a little bit slower tire, but then it stays there for the rest of the race for 1 or 2 hours race. I mean, it's difficult to choose the right kind of tire for each circuit, because you have to find the fastest tire, which lasts for the 1.5 or 2 hours which we need before the pit stop.
The rules say that all cars should have the opportunity to practice for 3 hours, divided into 2 runs. The fastest car then takes pole position at the start, right up at the front, and something of a victory in itself. The race on the following day underlines how important strength and reliability are, apart from speed.
Okay, ready?
It's all very well jumping into the car and zooming off to break the lap record. However, it's vital the car is precisely adjusted in relation to conditions on the different tracks. This applies to the engine, suspension, brakes, as well as road holding. During practice, so-called qualifying tires are used. Here again, they have to be well adapted to the track, the asphalt, and the temperature. These tires have a considerably softer rubber composition than the race tires. They very quickly achieve maximum grip, but wear out just as rapidly, with the car skating about as on an ice rink after a couple of laps. Achieving fast times requires a certain amount of luck with traffic. A single obstacle can ruin everything. But it's a long race. You drive either 3.5 hours or at least 500 kilometers.
The vital thing is having a good car that works 100% during the race, so that it doesn't really matter whether you're in 1st or 5th place.
Så har det i praktiken ingen större betydelse.
The cars follow a so-called pace car for the first lap to warm up the tires so they produce maximum grip. Once they're on the straight stretch before the starting line, the car in pole position takes over. They're off, into 3rd gear, then 4th at the corner. The pressure's building up behind. If an accident happens anywhere, it'll happen right here. Being in front is a clear advantage. But your opponents are keenly ready to find that space and edge you out. Into third out of the corner, fourth, then fifth, and on to the next corner. Top speeds at Anderstorp are around 240 kilometers per hour. The cars have to make at least one pit stop during the race. They do about 8 miles to the gallon, and their tanks don't contain enough fuel to see them through the entire distance. They have to change drivers, Anders replacing Johnny and Ulf taking over from Thomas, as well as tires, which are completely bare after almost 2 hours racing. The quicker, the better. One driver out, another in. A quick exchange of words. Everything works smoothly, as it has to if you want to stay with the world's top elite. And they're off again.
They must have consumed more fuel. We were having some really tough duels at the start, and those duels don't occur during training when we work out petrol consumption. I suppose we'll have to make another quick stop at the end. I almost ran out of petrol. Having problems during the change? Yeah, they didn't know I was coming in. They thought I was going to come in 5 laps later.
With an average of 136 kilometers an hour, Anderstorp is regarded as a slow circuit. After 3.5 hours, there's just 2.5 tenths of a second separating Thomas in the lead from Armin Hane. Anders is 35 seconds after them.
I'm very, very happy myself, and I'm very happy from Ulf and the team, RS, which have made a fantastic work during the winter, the preparation, and this week we have a hard, tough testing, and we could win and give them something for all the hard work. I'm very happy for the team.
It's funny how everybody seems to have this problem when they are in first, second, and third place.
Especially when you're third, you have a big problem.
Because I'm home in Sweden, I was thinking about there's a difference. If you're winning, you're up in the stars. If I don't win, I can hang myself outside.
Volvo. What's that mean? La Volvo?
Yes, the Volvo. You are a pilot with Volvo.
Sometimes I wonder why I didn't take up golf instead.
After the message, you are relaxed? More relaxed.
But then, once the flag's been raised, it's just as if horns suddenly sprout under your helmet, and you're off, with no time to think about anything else.
Very nice welcome to everybody. You know the rule. To make a good race, a fully good race, we need not too bad organizer, but we need first of all fully good drivers. You are fully good drivers. When you stop in the pits, 4 mechanics, not more, not less. I don't speak about the attendance for fuel, for the attendance and the technicals for tires. It's quite another thing. But mechanics for all. The drivers in...
The 24-hour race at Spa-Francorchamps in Belgium. One big challenge to man and machine from start to finish.
The life becomes great.
go flat out right from the start, with speeds averaging about 150 kilometers per hour and reaching 270 in parts. They start in the late afternoon, drive all night and all the next day. All they're planning to change are 2 sets of brake pads per car. Everything else will hold. Or will it? 24 hours is a long time. It takes 1.5 minutes to change brake pads, 35 minutes to change a turbo unit. And they can usually manage a rear axle in 20 minutes.
The airjack man any time at all. Never the airjack man at all. You're at 5.
After 9 hours of merciless driving, Johnny and Anders are in 2nd place, with Ulf and Thomas 6th. Right now, these cars are the fastest in the field. And there was evening. And there was morning, the 2nd day. It's really warm. The temperature in the cars is a stifling 60 degrees centigrade, but it feels even warmer.
We sweat a great deal. One loses something like 2, 3 or 4 kilos depending on what the weather's like, so we have to drink a lot during this time.
In such conditions, survival very much depends on the body getting the liquids, minerals and vitamins it needs. Doctors are on hand, continuously checking up on the drivers throughout the race. People get tired. Mistakes happen. 24 hours is inhuman. And the question is, will the car hold? Is the material good enough?
Jag fattar att han inte var så homogen.
Ja, han fick ju hämta han varje gång och jag har fått hämta han ligger han där inne. You must always have someone.
I have said to him, and I have called him to be ready. And you have come in.
so hot. I can't believe it.
If you stop now for the podium, and still.
After 23 hours with a second place well in sight, the crankshaft goes, ripping into the block and flooding the cockpit in a deluge of petrol and oil.
Und Feuer, alle Öl kommt vom Motor raus, Auspuffrohr, Feuer über alles rund um Auto. Dann war Feuer vorbei, försökte in den Busstopp zu gehen, aber der Motor läuft nicht mehr. Und dann alle Öl kommt auf die Hinterreifen. Ein Loch gedreht und wieder Feuer, försökte anlassen, wieder Feuer.
It's the Germans' day for the first time. Former world champion Dieter Quester regains the blue ribbon of Spa-Francorchamps.
Det känns alltid väldigt,
It's always a big letdown to have to break off a race because of some material failure. But okay, that's the way it can go in racing. You can't expect things to hold 100%. I mean, we're pushing them up to the very limit of what they can take.
Vi är så pass nära gränserna på vad saker och ting tål.
Even if winning isn't the most important thing, it is what we all aim for. That's why it becomes number one. It's what gives you satisfaction. And it's the reward for all your sacrifices, all the tears and the sweat you've spilled to win. But it has to be done straight and without any funny tricks.
Winning, that's what it's all about. Second and third place are the same as losing.
I'm not afraid, I enjoy it. I always aim for victory. I try my best, and I think most of them do the same.
Winning, that's what counts. The winners are remembered, their autographs are prized. They get the headlines, the lucrative contracts. That's what it's all about. All the waiting is forgotten. All the boring hotels, trips, missing your family, the tedious training and testing. All that's forgotten when you win. Winning, that's what it's all about.
Wow, what a treat. That's how it feels after a fortnight on the road before you get home. It's heavy going. But then, after a week, you get that hunger again. After another week, it's positively painful. You can never get enough of it.